And in today's video, I'm going to share with you exactly why I believe wholesaling commercial real estate properties is one of the most underutilized sales strategies as a wholesaler and as a broker. So the first thing I want to start out with is the fundamentals of wholesaling. It all starts out with finding direct-to-seller, motivated off-market deals. Because what so many people confuse when it comes to the real estate business is that just finding somebody who would like to sell their property is not good enough. Let's just make that clear. If you randomly are prospecting, or you're doing mailers, or you're doing several different ways that you can be finding leads, so you generate a lead and you get somebody on the phone and they want to sell their property, it doesn't just mean you can wholesale it. It is specifically finding good, motivated sellers that are looking to sell their property for a discount, which is not very frequently. When you're talking to somebody and they say that they would like to sell or they're open to selling their commercial property, we don't always just make the assumption that they're looking to sell their property for, an unbelievably great price that we're going to be able to wholesale and make $1 million. That's just not the case the vast majority of the time. So let's break down overall what we're looking for. We're looking for somebody who is not a very seasoned investor. This is somebody who owns maybe 1, 2, at most 3 properties, okay? Most of the time, if they own many more than 3 properties, they're pretty savvy and know what the heck they're doing. If they own maybe 1 or a few, right, they maybe inherited them, right, which is a great situation, but they might not be as savvy and understand the market as to what the true value of this asset is. Because we are looking for somebody who is not a savvy investor when it comes to wholesaling properties, right? And they don't truly know the intricate value of their property, right? And they're willing to sell it at a price because it's not motivated by price. It's an outside motivation and an outside reason, outside price, right? They want to sell it not just because of a price. They want to sell it because it solves a problem. They are tired of dealing with management. They're about to have to spend a ton of money renovating the property and they don't have the money to do so. Maybe it's vacant and not generating any money and they're losing money every month. There are many reasons as to why somebody will sell a property for less than market value. It happens all the time, and at all price points, by the way. Second part of finding undervalued deals is location. I personally like to avoid D-class markets, right? The not so great areas. Now, I grew up in New Jersey, and in New Jersey, there's a couple D-class markets that, to me, is something that I prefer not to invest in. And there are D-class markets all over the country. What I want to define a D-class market in my eyes as is an area that has very high crime, very low appreciation, if anything at all, and the property values are very stagnant, which is obviously has to do with the very low appreciation, but they've been stagnant for a very long time. So I'll give you an example. There's areas like Camden or Trenton in New Jersey. These are D-class markets and have been for very long times. Now, obviously, in some maybe outskirts areas, they've been gentrified because they're closer to other markets. But the downtown areas of these towns have been very, very depressed for a long time. Now, if you were to invest in these areas, you might get higher cash flows, but you also have higher levels of risk when it comes to actually collecting payments. I have several stories that I can go into of personal friends and including like business partners of mine that have literally gotten robbed or been held at gunpoint in some of these areas. So it's very important to realize there are massive levels of risk that I just don't care to be involved in, right, to go into these areas. Now, if hypothetically you happen to be in a D-class market, right, or you grew up in a D-class market, right, that's okay, right, and you have connections to that market, okay, I can understand that. Keep in mind something, that there is going to be investors for just about every market. And if we could just choose, right, if we were just sitting in a boardroom together, we're sitting in an office together, and we're saying, hey, let's just choose a market we want to target, I would recommend we choose other markets. A, B, and C markets are just a great place to invest in, right? These are areas that have already seen growth. These are areas that already have a proven track record to earn money, high levels of appreciation, moderate cash flows for, A markets, right? Decent cash flows for Bs and pretty much exceptional cash flows in C markets. Now, cash flow is not everything, but it's just things to be paying attention to because you're trying to find that beautiful mix of good cash flow and good appreciation, right? We don't need to have fantastic in either, right? We prefer, obviously, we'd love to have fantastic of both, right? Both fantastic cash flow and fantastic appreciation, but obviously there's the risk tolerance that you need to be okay with, and so does your investor who's actually going to be buying the deal after you, right? And there's more investors for C, B, and A markets than there are for D-class markets. One thing I see a lot of people make the mistake of, specifically, this is not multifamily related, this is specifically for industrial, retail, or office. I see that they go for for too small of a property, right? In multifamily, you could wholesale 2 families, 3 families, 4 families, 5 families, 8s, 10s, right? Like a little bit smaller stuff, right? Than, maybe the larger 20 units, 50, 100, 200 units, right? Like there's a lot of money to be made in the smaller multifamily wholesaling, right? There's some great money there. In the smaller commercial world, like smaller industrial, smaller retail, smaller office, it's much more complex and difficult to find a buyer for a smaller industrial building, a smaller retail building, than it is a larger property. I'm typically going to say my cutoff personally is around 10,000 square feet at the absolute smallest. Now you might be able to get away with slightly smaller, maybe just maybe if the building is, industrial or retail and it's like perfect, right? There's a lot of great tenants. I mean, there's obviously some other variations. I just like to try to say, have a mental benchmark of where, like, for us, anything less than like 10,000 feet is a lot more complicated to sell. However, we do a little bit between the 7 and 10,000, but once you start really getting down to like 4,000 feet, it's like, who's really going to be buying this, right? Like, because we want to be able to target a specific level of investor, and typically their buying criteria in our experiences has been 10 to 50,000 square feet, or even 20,000 to 100,000 square feet, retail or industrial, right? I mean, office is obviously just getting absolutely decimated in this time. Not something we spend too much time on, but just specifically for industrial or retail, try to say from like 10,000 to 30,000, 10,000 to 50,000 feet to start. You're gonna have a lot more success in that range because there's also gonna be a lot more sophisticated buyers who are looking in that product range. Now let's shift gears to how do we evaluate an opportunity? If you get a property, how do we evaluate it? How do we know if this is gonna be a good deal? Well, you need to know 3 specific metrics. Number 1 is the current intrinsic value of this asset. Now, of course, you're gonna need things like a rent roll. If it's industrial and or retail or office, you're going to need to see leases. You're going to need to know everything you possibly can about the leases. Who pays what, triple net, double net, gross plus CAM, you name it. You're going to need to know all these intricacies. You're going to need as much financial documentation as possible. It all comes down to knowing these 3 things. So 1 is the current intrinsic value, which you get from evaluating the property, going through all my videos of how to underwrite properties. Once you come up with the current intrinsic value of the property, great. Checkbox number 1. Cool. Let's just say in this instance, the property is really worth about $1 million. Let's say the property owner wants $1.5 million, but it's maybe worth $1 million. So we found out based on the all the numbers and all the information, the documentation, the financials, the leases, the P&L, the rent roll, everything that they sent over to us, it's worth about $1 million. They told us they want 1.5. We're now going to come up with point number 2, which is what is the future intrinsic value of this property, right? The pro forma value. Now, pro forma is important to know, right? However, the biggest mistake people make is that they try to sell a property based on pro forma. We want to be buying the property at a good price, where the pro forma, not only, of course, it should be higher than what we're paying today, of course, but we make our money when we buy it. So if we find out that the future value, right, the pro forma value of this asset, as an example, is $1.6 million. Seller wants 1.5. Future intrinsic value in 5 years, increasing the rents, fixing the property up, spending some money, spending like 100, 200 grand on fixing the property up, and so on and so forth. It's going to be worth around 1.6, maybe 1.7 million. They're like, guys, well, I got a property for 1.5. It's going to be worth 1.6 to 1.7 in a few years' time. I mean, this could be a fantastic opportunity for you to make some good money. You sound stupid when you say things like that. Like, I'm just going to be honest, of like, as an investor myself, when people bring me deals and like the future pro forma value is 5% or 8% higher than what you're buying it for in 5 years. I mean, think about your internal rate of return. It's going to be very, very low. If the property is only going to be worth 100 to 200 grand, especially at those kind of price ranges, unless you're buying the deal for 50 grand, it's going to be worth 100 grand more or 200 grand more in 5 years. Yeah, sure, that could be decent. But when you're talking about these level of price points, or nonetheless call it $10 million and it's going to be worth 11, it's like, think about it. If I have to spend $500,000 and it's going to cost me 300 grand in closing costs, to buy the property, or 200 grand in closing costs to buy the property, what am I actually making? I'm not making anything, right? So you want to have a large enough spread between what your current value is and what the future value is of this property to even see if there's any room here for a wholesale deal. If the seller wants 1.5 and it's only going to be worth between 1.6 and 1.7 in 5 years, right? We always estimate between a 3 and 5 year hold typically. If that is the case, then the odds of me making any money here or being able to even sell it anywhere near the 1.5 is going to be pretty freaking slim. What I'm trying to find is where the property future value is so much higher, typically at least something in the vicinity of like a 30% to 50% bump. Even to broker these deals most of the time, they need to be roughly 30 to 50% in 5 years. That's what we try to find. We try to find the best deals in the marketplace, right? So if there's like let's just say a 50% bump, right? So we can buy it at $1 million, similar to what I was just saying. You could buy it at $1 million, it'll be worth 1.5 million. That's something that we could probably sell. However, if you're buying it for 1.5, it's only gonna be worth 1.6, there's not enough room. You need to have the difference between current value and future value be as close to 50% or more as possible. Now, of course, if it's 30%, probably still can make some money. 10 million can be worth, 13 million. Maybe there's some money to be made there. Sure. Obviously, the higher price points for that to be the case, you could have a little bit more compressed future value percentage ratios between current and future. There's some money to be made there. But when you're only dealing with a smaller property, buying it for 100, it's going to be worth 130. It's very hard to make any money, right? Or $1 million, it's going to be worth 1.3 in 5 years. And you got to spend 100, 150K to get there, plus 25 to 50 or 75K in closing costs. There's not any money to be made, guys. So that's why we need to have as much spread as possible. Now, the third key factor here when it comes to evaluating the property is your maximum allowable offer. If you've wholesaled residential properties, you're probably familiar with the MAO, right? The maximum allowable offer. This is a very, very important term, which is basically saying what is our maximum number that we can offer on a property where if we were to get it accepted, we still have enough room to make money on this deal and not feel like we're constrained or pressured by any way, shape, and form. Now, let me explain what I mean by this. Back to our example. Property is currently worth $1 million. Seller wants 1.5. It's probably only worth 1.6, 1.7. In this situation, our maximum allowable offer might be something like $1.1 million, maybe $1.2 million, maybe. Yeah, I doubt it. Probably $1.1 million. Because here's the problem. If we pay, right, you and I are partners here. Let's say we offer $1 million and they come back at $1.2 million, right? Seller counters back at $1.2 million. Okay, we just talked about that. It will only be worth 1.6, 1.7 in 5 years. Let's say after we spend at least 100, 150 grand on it, and again after they're spending, call it 1.2 million, they're probably gonna spend 50 grand minimum in closing costs, right? Somewhere in that vicinity. They're gonna be in it for 1.25 plus another 150 in renovations, and now they're into it for $1.4 million roughly, right? It's only gonna be worth 1.6, 1.7. There's not a lot of room, so that might be the highest possible number that we can get somebody else to pay, maybe, just maybe, which is why I think it's so crucial. And the biggest mistake I see that is that people offer way too much freaking money to start because they don't want to offend the seller. It's not about being offensive. It's about making them a real offer that is legitimate, that you know you can close. Because if the number is, even if it's half as much as that they want, right? Because a seller's gonna want whatever the heck they want anyways, right? Like if you called me on any one of my properties that I don't want to sell, I'm gonna tell you a stupid number because I don't need to sell it because I'm not that motivated. But when you're speaking to a seller and they say, I want $1.5 million for the property, you and I both know, let's say we ran the numbers, this could be worth $1 million. Great. Why not offer 700 or 800 grand, right? Because you might say that, well, the seller might get pissed off. Okay, and what if they don't? What happens if actually they would have accepted 700 or 800 grand, but you offered them $1.2 million because you didn't want to hurt their feelings? At $1.2 million, you might not be able to sell it, right? Because it's way too much money. You told them you can get them $1.2 million. You get into contract, right? You give them a deposit of X amount of money. You have that money locked up. You pitch the deal out and you can't sell it now. And then all of a sudden you got to go back to the guy and say, hey, I offered you too much money. I'd rather go the other route. I'm saying, hey, I'll offer you 700 grand. I know I can offer $1 million, right? It's probably easy. I can easily get a buyer to pay maybe $1.1 million because I always want to find the best deals in the marketplace. That's my job. It's why people come to me to find great deals, right? Because I make people a lot of money. And we also look for fantastic all over the US, right? So, it's the give and take here. So it's very important in this scenario that we'll make the maximum allowable offer for us $1 million because we know that as a hypothetical, we know that we could probably get someone to pay maybe 1.1 in this example as a hypothetical, right? Obviously there's a lot more intricacies here. I'll start at 700 grand and then I'll go up to 800, maybe 9, maybe 850 or 875, right? 9.25, 950. And I'll really do my best to try to negotiate here. So by the time I bring it to an investor, I'm not saying to them, hey, I have a guy who's maybe willing to sell their property. They wanted 1.5, but I know they can take it for less. Why would I say something like that? What I'd rather do is say, hey, I've been speaking with this guy on, back and forth for weeks now. We've been negotiating. We got him to take a $1.1 million offer. At 1.1, it's a 9 cap day one. You're going to be able to make a fantastic return by increasing rents because all these leases are coming due in the next few years. You're going to be able to get these rents up drastically. They're all 50% on our market value. I think you can get this done for 1.1 million. And the best part is that once you make all these adjustments in 2 to 3 years, because all the leases will be up by then, with your rental increases and getting new tenants, better quality tenants in there, or even negotiating with them, you're going to be able to get the value from 1.1 to 1.6, maybe 1.7 million bucks. And all you need to do is just adjust the tenancy, right? That's it. The building's in great condition. I now know Because I've done my due diligence. We've sent somebody out to the property. We've toured the property. We've had pictures of the property. We've gotten all the information. Here's the financials. Here's the leases. Here's all the information. I've negotiated with the seller. I already know he will take 1.1 and this is his best number. And now they come back to me and say, listen, Henry, I did my due diligence. I can only pay $1 million. No problem. Once again, get it done in $1 million. I'll do my absolute best. But just to be super clear, I'm telling you, look, 1.1 was his bottom line. Is there any wiggle room in your $1 million? Do you think we can do at least $1,050,000? Because I don't want to go to this guy because we've been talking back and forth. He's already declined offers of $1 million. Like, I don't want to just present him another $1 million offer, right? Let's go at $1,050,000 and see if we can make something happen. Yes, no, maybe so, right? Maybe your client, your buyer is willing to do so or not. But the point is, this is why we make aggressive offers up front, because it closes the time frame, it closes the time gap, because so many people will take weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks in a process, sometimes months, to get to the point of where you actually have not only all the information for a property, you've underwritten it, and you've got it in front of enough buyers where those buyers will give you an offer, then you get that signed and you present that to a seller. What we do differently is that I don't need to wait for a buyer to tell me what they're willing to pay. I know what they're willing to pay. I do my due diligence. I underwrite properties, thousands and thousands and thousands of properties every single year. I underwrite and I make thousands of offers a year because I know what a buyer is probably going to be willing to pay. Because if you underwrite properties appropriately and you are very conservative in your underwriting, you know for a reasonable fact that if someone bought a property down the street, you saw a property trade at X price per square foot right down the street, if you called up that buyer because he owns 6 other properties, if you called them and said, hey, I have another property similar to the one you just bought at 123 Main Street, wherever, this property is a better price per square foot and a better cap rate than what you bought down the street, would you be open to buying another property? And I know that, hey, if he's willing to pay this price per square foot and this cap rate based on this property, because we can also tell the future value of that property based on the same assumptions, right? This is where you can be like, oh, I have an even better deal for you, right? And this is how we sell so many properties every year, right? Because all the data is right in front of us. All we have to do is make find those sellers, make them reasonable offers, and then find the buyers to buy the property at the price that they know is fair and reasonable. Let's talk about the negotiations for a moment. What's incredibly important here, and I feel like so many people don't follow through with this, is when you have a seller who's willing to, let's just say they come to you and say, I want $1.5 million, okay? When you have a seller who says, hey, I'm willing to take $1.5 million, why not give them an offer of some sort? Give them any offer. So we just talked about this briefly, but so many people just wait. They don't give them an offer. They try to give all the information to a bunch of other buyers before they even make an offer. It is a silly thing that wastes a lot of time. And number two, the other part when it comes to negotiations is get it in writing. Get a buyer to always write up an offer. Every offer, 100% of the time, you want to make sure you get every single offer written up. I'm not just saying you send it in an email. You call up the seller and verbally present the offer. You always want to present an offer over the phone. Now, what this will do is that you're able to handle the objections in real time. Because if you just send them an email and say, let me know what you think, that's not the right way to do it. Because what's going to happen is that if the number's too low, they're just going to never call you back. Present offers over the phone, and then you can always email it and then have them review it with you in real time once you have them on the phone. There is a dance. There is a specific dance that you're going to play between the seller and the buyer and making sure you still have room. Because the big mistake that also people make is they offer too much money. So what happens here is that sellers willing, let's just say seller wants 1.5. Buyer's willing to take willing to buy it for 1.3. You can't offer 1.3 million. You need to offer like 1.1 now to the seller because the buyer's only willing to pay 1.3. And if you offer, let's say 1.25 and you're going to wholesale it and you want to double close, you're not making anything. You're making you will lose money. Keep yourself some spread, right? You want to play this dance between seller and buyer, and you need to have enough spread. So if a buyer comes in at 1.3 and a seller wants 1.5, you need to go back to that seller and say, hey, I'm going to offer you 1.1 and try to negotiate the best you can. And if they come down to 1.3, you got to get your buyer up to 1.4, 1.45 and try to get them down even a little bit on the seller side. You get them down to 1.25, right? So you can try to build some spread for yourself. The whole purpose of this business when it comes to wholesaling in general is finding wonderful off-market direct-to-seller deals. Motivated sellers at wonderful prices. Again, we looked for properties. If you have properties anywhere in the country, following a lot of these models, we look for specifically undervalued properties that cash flow day one and have a clean and simple value add component to the property. If you find that type of property anywhere in the country, I want to work with you. So if you have great deals, you can email us at info@henryeisenstein.com. I would love to be able to help you out and help you sell more deals in 2025. Let's kick some butt. Appreciate you guys following the content. If you have any questions, put in the comment section down below or feel free to email us or schedule a call. Appreciate you guys so very much, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care.